Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 426. Thank you for joining me today. Happy Friday. Hope you guys have had a good week. Hope you're having a good summer. We're going to pick up where we left off in the last podcast. And, we're probably going to be talking about this subject for, who knows, the foreseeable future. I'm going to be, interweaving in some news, contemporary news, some news that is timely, to make the points that, I'm trying to share here, in this podcast. And, we're talking about, again, the third century crises, our third century crisis, the third century crisis of the United States. The United States is in its third century as a nation. We celebrated our 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July. But as I was explaining to you in, a few podcasts ago, that's not the 250th anniversary of the founding of the nation. The nation doesn't become a nation, the United States of America, until 1788. After New Hampshire becomes the 9th state to ratify the Constitution. And so the date of the United States is around 238 years or so. And you can see we're relating our third century crisis to the third century crisis of the Roman Empire. And you can see their third century crisis started at 235. So we're right there at that same period of time when the crisis of the third century started for the Roman Empire. And, that's where we are. And we've been in this crisis that we're dealing with right now, for a number of years, quite frankly. And, it threatens the survival of the United States, just like the third century crisis that the Roman Empire, experienced in their third century, eventually changed the Roman Empire forever. Now, it took time. I've told you the empire was fragmented in the third century crises of the Roman Empire, and then it is brought together again by Aurelian and Diocletian, and then after Diocletian, after he retires and leaves the eastern part of the empire to his successor, Constantine eventually unites the entire empire again together and then moves the capital of the empire from Rome to Constantinople, and then the empire fragments together. But the start of that is the third century crisis. And I've been asking the question, what is the United States going to look like after our third century crisis? Will we fragment? Will we break up into different, different countries, different providences? Will we be conquered? Will the United States still exist? And so that's what we've been talking about. And we've been talking about the parallel crises that we're dealing with. We've identified the election crisis. I don't know if you guys saw what the state of New Jersey this week came out, the information that New Jersey came out with this week, that they had, and this is what they're telling us. It was a software glitch, software problem. They're having problems with software in New Jersey. And the governor came out and admitted to the fact that, that this software glitch registered 6,000 non-citizens to vote. They shouldn't be voted, and at least 4 of them voted. And that's what they tell us. They won't turn over their voting rolls to the Department of Justice so this information can be verified. But that's what they're telling us. They had a software glitch. But anyway, so we have the election crises that we've identified. They are, and I'm telling you, each one of these crises, it's intentional. It's not an accident that we have an election crisis. It's not an accident that we have an education crisis. It's not an accident that we have a debt crisis, a treason crisis. The racial tribalism crisis is very intentional. The rise of Marxism, all of this pertains to the rise of Marxism, is very intentional. And it's crazy because debating the SAVE Act and voter ID. I mean, something that is base level of what we need to secure our elections. They're fighting that. They don't want to do that. So these are the crises that we're dealing with right now. We're going to be adding to this list at some period of time, but we're focusing now on the rise of Marxism and particularly the racial tribalism, the intentional dividing of this nation along racial lines to create conflict that the Marxists can use the conflict to advance their Marxism. So we were talking about some of these issues that we're dealing with parallel to the crisis of the 3rd century that the Romans were dealing with, and then some of them are unique. We were also relating it to the Alexander Fraser Tyler, Scottish judge and historian. His quote: a democracy is always temporary in nature. It can only exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy will continue to exist up until the time that voters discover that they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. This is the public treasury. 39.6. It's funny. We did the podcast on Monday and it was 39.5 trillion. And now we're at 39.6 trillion. From Monday to Friday, now we're at 39.6 trillion. I said that we were adding 100 billion every week. I mean, it looks like we're adding 100 billion in less than a week. We'll be at 40 trillion in no time. I said we'd be at 40 trillion by the end of the summer. This looks like we'll be at 40 trillion by the end of July. This is a crisis, people. This is the public treasury. And Alexander Fraser Tyler says that a democracy can only exist until voters figure out that they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidate that promises the most goodies, the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result being that every democracy will finally collapse due to loose fiscal policies, which always followed by dictatorship. And the cycle that Fraser identified was that nations, empires, human civilizations go from bondage to faith to courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, that the abundance is created by the faith, courage, and liberty. That's how the abundance is created, is what Fraser said. But from abundance, the generations after abundance go to selfishness, to complacency, to apathy, and then to dependence, and then back to bondage. And what the bondage that the elite are creating right now is going to be a technological surveillance state where you'll never have faith again. You'll never have courage again. You'll never have liberty again, and you'll never have abundance again. That they are going to secure themselves as the permanent bourgeoisie under a technological security spy state that you'll never, ever be able to revolt against. That's what's going to happen, and that's what these people are trying to create. I was explaining to you, these are the people that created this debt crisis. And the debt crisis is everything. This is out of all of these crises, the real crisis that I believe that has the potential to take this country down, to divide this country and fragment this country and put this country in a state of that it is vulnerable to outsized forces taking over this country. I believe that number 3, the debt crisis, is the most serious. It's a serious crisis. $40 trillion, man. I don't even know if people realize how much that is, but it didn't come out of nowhere. It was very intentional, the creation of that debt. We were on our way to being completely debt free. There's actually a document that I've talked about many times on this podcast. It was a secret document that was passed around in the Clinton administration in the year 2000. Secretly, they were passing it around in his administration, where they were predicting that the United States was going to be completely debt-free in 10 years from 2000. By 2010, we could have been completely debt-free if we would have kept on the same trajectory that we were on in 2000. We were going to be completely debt-free, and they identified it as a crisis. Something needs to be done to prevent the United States from being complete, and they did it. Hey, boy, did they do it. But this was all done over the last 26 years. The last 26 years, this was done, the creation of all of this debt. and it was very intentional. And the majority of it is done by these people. People are talking about Trump, and I include Trump in this. I'm not going to say that Trump has tried to reduce the debt. He hasn't. His last budget increased the debt significantly. I understand that he wants to get funding for the border, and he was able to secure the border, which is one of the crises that we're going to get into, is this migration crisis, which is very intentional. I understand that he needed money to do that he needed to fund DHS and ICE and the military and all this stuff, but he increased the debt. Now, no one can say that Donald Trump has decreased the debt. But what you're looking at on this screen, Bill Clinton, 8 years, George Bush, 8 years, Barack Obama, 8 years, 4 years of Joe Biden, and Joe Biden was in the Senate or vice president, for all of these administrations, these previous administrations. So Joe Biden helped pass legislation to build this debt, even though he wasn't president of the United States. Joe Biden's there as a Senate leader through the Clinton administration, through the Bush administration. He's vice president for Barack Obama, and then he becomes president himself. These people represent 28 years right here, 32 years if you include the 4 years of George H.W. Bush before Bill Clinton. They represent 28 years is what you're looking at if you include George H.W. Bush. That's 32 years. Trump's only been president for 5.5 years. So, yeah, I'm going to include Trump in this and say that Trump hasn't been able to decrease the debt. But these people are more responsible than Trump. How can you say Trump, who's only been president for 5 years, is more responsible than these people that represent 28 years, 32 years, if you include George H.W. Bush? So these are the people that did this, and it's very intentional. It's very intentional. So we're talking about the rise of Marxism, and that there should be no surprise that Marxism is on the rise, that the rise of Marxism is very intentional, and the conditions have been created to make the rise of Marxism inevitable. These are the conditions that make the rise of Marxism inevitable. People are talking about affordability and healthcare and all this stuff. The reason that we don't have any money for entitlements, the reason we don't have any money for programs, and the reason that we don't have any money to do stuff for our own people is because we're $40 trillion in debt. This is going to bring higher taxes. This is going to bring austerity. You get austerity when you're $40 trillion in debt. If we were debt free, be plenty of money for entitlements. Be plenty of money for programs and universal health care and all that stuff. But we don't have money for universal health care, people. We don't have money for anything, quite frankly. Everything that we're doing on the credit card and going further and further into debt to do it. So those make the rise of socialism. It makes socialism, Marxism more appealing when you are in an economic environment the way that we are right now. And it's on the rise. And we've looked at the proposals of the Democratic Socialists of America. Number one, abolish the Senate and the Electoral College. I've explained to you why they want to do that, because the Democratic and Democratic Socialist means direct democracy. They want direct democracy, and you can't have direct democracy with the bicameral legislature. You can't have direct democracy with the Electoral College and all these others. Abolish ICE, increase immigration, like Ezra Klein said in the podcast we played in the last podcast, to open borders, to cure global poverty is what he said. These are all part of the Democratic Socialist platform, and they're winning elections. Winning elections in New York. They're winning elections in Colorado. We're going to see next week how they do in Michigan. It is very interesting. But we were looking, and we're going to focus on, and the next couple of podcasts, as we did in the last podcast, number 5 here, the crisis number 5 that we've identified, the crises of racial tribalism and the intentional dividing of this country along racial lines. And it's a strategy to divide this nation, so the nation is not paying attention to what the elite are doing, what these criminals are doing in looting us. They're having us fight each other over, racial tribalism, white versus black, and getting all riled up around stuff that doesn't mean anything, that doesn't matter nearly as much as this does. But as long as you are focused on your white neighbor or your black neighbor and demonizing them, then you're not focusing on this, which is the real crisis that has the potential to bring down our nation. So it's divide and conquer, and the Marxists, the communists, as we showed with the G. Edward Griffin clip from the 1950s, where he says that as early as the 1920s, the communists saw that the mechanism that they could use to divide this nation and to subvert this nation and undermine this nation and bring in and create the circumstances to bring in the rise of Marxism were the racial differences. They can create the conflict between the races and then use that conflict, as Marxist theorizes in conflict theory, that they can use that conflict to create the environment for the rise of Marxism. And we'll listen to G. Edward Griffin again.
As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric.
It's the weakest and most vulnerable point that they identified, the Marxists. It's the weakest and most vulnerable point in our society that they can use to exploit these tribal differences among racial lines, to use to exploit so they can create the environment, create the circumstances for the rise of Marxism, capitalize on the conflict. That's what
1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat.
So constantly agitating and prodding is what he says. And that they have agitators that they have assigned. Now, not everyone is a paid agitator. You don't need a bunch of, paid agitators that are working towards this end. You only need a few. And I have some suspicions about who some of these paid agitators are. And he says that the agitators are on the right, on the black side. They have black agitators and they have white agitators. The black agitators are agitating the black community and getting them all riled up. And then the white agitators are agitating the white community, but they're paid and they're working together. The black agitators and the white agitators are working towards the same end. Working together is to the black agitators are paid and they are commissioned to get the black people all riled up, and the white agitators are paid to get the white people acting tribal and all riled up. And so
Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. We mustn't kid ourselves into thinking that the communists have placed their agitators only into the black communities. They're working both sides of the street. They want hatred, violence, and bloodshed between the races, and they don't care how they get it or whom they use.
So they're working both sides of the street. They got black agitators, they got white agitators, they want racial violence, and they want this conflict that they can use to advance Marxism. We're going to talk more about who some of these agitators are, but not everybody is an agitator. I mean, you're living in an environment where any idiot can record themselves saying any idiotic thing and put it on social media. And a lot of these people that you see on social media pushing racial tribalism, they're not paid agitators unless you count the fact that they're building up these major subscriber and viewer dollars that they're getting from the platforms for creating this trash content promoting racial tribalism. They're getting, some of them are have millions of followers. They're making money from TikTok. They're making money from X, part of the profit sharing on YouTube. They're making money and they have these followers. And those people are not, part of the establishment paid agitators that are out there. I mean, they're making money, but and they're getting money from the platforms. But like I was explaining in the last podcast, the pay, you only need a few of these paid agitators to promote this stuff, this racial tribalism, because the natural instinct of human beings is to be tribal. So all they have to do is play on that's why I was bringing up the bonobo apes and how they've studied us, and they can anticipate our behaviors, and they've done all these social experiments, and they know exactly how we're going to act if they do certain things and inject certain stimulus into our society. That's why the communists took over Hollywood. Hollywood is you can't tell that Hollywood is pushing an agenda, for a social engineering agenda, and they have been for decades. That's where it goes on. It's not only in the film. We talked about the films in the last podcast, but the TV shows, the same people who own the film industries, they also own the media, the news. Disney not only is pushing racial tribalism and propaganda in their films. Disney also owns the television stations. They own the news stations, ABC. That's why you see racial tribalism all over ABC, The View. They own ESPN. You saw they had to just fire all these race baiters because they're getting the Super Bowl this year. But every Disney product is pushing racial tribalism. So it's not only the films, but that's part of what I'm talking about. You don't need a lot of the agitators agitating. It's being agitated. The racial tribalism is being agitated through the media, but then you also have the paid influencer agitators that are agitating, and what they're doing is playing on the base instincts of human beings to be tribal. Human beings have always been tribal. It doesn't matter. It's not racial tribalism. You look at Africa. I mean, there's racial tribalism all over the continent. Black tribes fighting black tribes. They don't care. If you understand the continental slave trade, you had black tribes in Africa going out hunting and trapping other black tribes, enslaving them and selling them into slavery. Even today in Nigeria, you have the religious tribalism of Islam and Christians and different, tribal, atmosphere. Human beings are instinctively tribal. And what the communists are doing, what the Marxists are doing, is they're playing on that natural instinct that humans have to be tribal, and they're agitating it, like G. Edgar Griffin said, to create the conflict. That they identify that the most vulnerable point in the United States, if you want to bring down the United States, you want to subvert the United States, you want to create conflict in the United States to advance Marxism, the most vulnerable point are the racial differences among the Americans. And that they could, is what G. Edgar Griffin said, if they agitated, prodded, and encourage humans' natural instincts to be tribal, that they could divide the nation and bring the nation into open conflict and divide the nation so you're not paying attention to them looting you, people. This is what's going on. They're using you. And it's disgusting. And everybody sees what's going on. Everybody sees what's going on. And the Democrats have been doing it. Standing on the graves of black bodies, going back to 2020 and how they stood on the grave of George Floyd and used George Floyd's death for politics. This is what they do. They know exactly what they're doing, people. They had the long form video of the George Floyd arrest in the beginning. In the beginning, when the first crowd started to show up and destroy property and loot there in Minneapolis, they had the mayor, the city, they had the long form video that was taken from the body cameras. Each one of the police officers had body cameras. They gave you the full context. They hid that from you. They didn't let you see that. They let people show up all over the country and get get angry and burn down the country, show up to the White House, try to burn down St. John's Church across from the White House, try to burn down the White House. Trump had to be rushed to his underground bunker. They did all that for politics. They encouraged it. They encouraged people to show up and protest. And they had the long video of the body cameras the whole time. They had all the context of George Floyd resisting arrest, refusing to get in the car. And they just let the cell phone video of the end of that interaction of Officer Chauvin trying to restrain George Floyd on the ground, kneeling on his neck. They let that go viral. And they never showed anyone the long video that they had. The city of Minneapolis had. They let them burn down Minneapolis. They let them burn down many cities. And Democrats played on it. They played on it. Not a single Democrat told them to stop. They tore down a statue of Christopher Columbus in Baltimore, where Nancy Pelosi was born and her father was mayor in Little Italy. She's Italian. And they tore down the statue of Christopher Columbus. She's asked about it, and she says, I don't care about statues. That's what she says. These people are disgusting. Remember Jacob Frey, the mayor? He's the mayor of Minneapolis. Of course, he's not going to, Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, he's the one who would have made the decision if we're going to release the body cam video, the long body cam video, to give people the full context of what was going on. Maybe people wouldn't be so angry and out in the streets burning down. Jacob Frey, Democrat, mayor of Minneapolis, he kept the video. Remember him faking crying in front of George Floyd's casket? It's all about politics, people. It's all about dividing the nation. They know what they're doing. These African cloths. What do these African cloths have to do with George Floyd? What is that? Look at him holding up George Floyd's picture here, just standing on his grave. These people are disgusting, but they know exactly what they are doing. They're playing on people's base emotions. They knew that if they could get Black Americans angry about George Floyd and play on their emotions, that they can get them out to the polls to vote. So they didn't mind using George Floyd to get the vote out. They didn't care about George Floyd, but they didn't mind using him to get the vote out. They stood on his grave, whatever it takes. Well, they're doing the same thing now. Same thing now. They're standing on the grave of Nolan Wells, this kid that likely drowned. I'm not sure if he drowned or something nefarious happened. I mean, we don't have enough information yet, but it don't matter. None of that matters. The Democrats are going to use this. They're using this dead Black kid for politics to rile up Black voters, get them all emotional and tribal, so they'll come out and vote for Democrats. Don't care anything about Nolan Wells or what happened to that boy. Using these parents, using this tragedy for politics. And when you hire someone like Ben Crump to represent you, I mean, where'd this guy come from? Did you guys hear him reading from this autopsy report? How's this guy pass law school? How's this guy pass the bar reading like that? Can barely put together an English sentence. I mean, when I talk about paid agitators, people that are working to agitate the instinctive, the instincts of human beings to be tribal, that are paid agitators. I'm talking about people like Ben Crump. I want to know what Ben Crump's working for. I want to know how Ben Crump passed the bar. I want to know who's really buttering Ben Crump's bread. He's an agitator. I want you to listen to this guy. This is the speech that he gives at the NAACP meeting. Now, mind you, these people are from Mississippi. They turned the kid's funeral into a entire spectacle. I mean, no one who was friends of the family and knew the kid did the eulogy. They had Al Sharpton doing the eulogy. Al Sharpton doesn't know this kid or know this family from a hole in the wall. They had Al Sharpton doing the eulogy, just turned the whole funeral into a spectacle for politics. They tried to say that Trump's administration is not aiding in the investigation, which is a lie, but this is how we know that they're using it for politics, because this is what they do, using dead bodies for politics. Saying Trump's administration is not aiding in the investigation, which is a lie. The FBI is in Mississippi helping with the investigation. If anything nefarious happened, there should be justice. I'm not saying that something did or didn't happen, but I know one thing. I know what these people are doing is disgusting. And I'm including the parents into this. I'm including these people into this. I want you to listen to what Benjamin Crump says when he finally, the guy's been holding on to this independent autopsy that they paid for. Actually, Colin Kaepernick paid for it, but we'll get into that in a moment. And he's had this. So they decided to bring this family all the way from Mississippi to Chicago, fly them to Chicago, and do this big presentation at the NAACP meeting in Chicago to show what they find, because everybody's been asking, what's up with this independent autopsy? You guys have been talking about this. Everybody's been asking for it. If you look into the comment section of his social media, everybody was like, where's this autopsy? Where's this autopsy? So they finally say that we're going to do the autopsy tomorrow at the NAACP meeting in Chicago. I don't know why you got to come all the way from Mississippi to Chicago to do this, but they did it at the NAACP. Mind you, over 200 people have been murdered in the city of Chicago in the first 6 months of this year. Who do you think those people are? Over 200 people murdered in the first 6 months of this year in Chicago. I want you to think about that as when I played this clip of Benjamin Crump, that something like 210 people have been murdered in the first 6 months of this year in Chicago. And this is what he says. Take a listen.
It matters. Not just what happened, but what we do in the aftermath of them being taken away from us. And just like the NAACP stood up when...
So he says that it matters what we do in the aftermath of them being taken from us. We don't know that Nolan Wells was taken from you. Over 4,000 people drown each summer in America. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I grew up on the Gulf of Mexico. People drown every year. They get caught up in currents. They may be able to swim fine, but they get caught up in a riptide and they're dead. It happens every year. It's tragic. But we don't know that Nolan Wells, we have no evidence that anything nefarious happened yet. But they're just assuming and speculating that something happened, making it a racial issue, which we're going to get to in a moment, and dividing this nation.
It matters. Not just what happened, but what we do in the aftermath of them being taken away from us. And just like the NAACP stood up when another tragedy in Mississippi, taking the life of young Emmett Till.
Why do you have to mention Emmett Till? Why do you have to mention Emmett Till? We don't know that anything nefarious happened to Nolan Wells at all. But he's bringing up this tragic event that happened in Mississippi with Emmett Till. What is it? 60 years ago? 50 years ago? Bringing that up? Why is he bringing that up? The same reason that I was explaining in the last podcast, that when Barack Obama is coming into office, all that planned. We'll get into that, probably get into that deep into in the next podcast. But Obama didn't just come out of nowhere, people. And at the same time Obama's coming on the scene, Hollywood is releasing all of these movies and all of these TV shows that have themes that deal with slavery, segregation, Jim Crow, civil rights. That's not by accident. That's to trigger this emotional response in Black people, to trigger this emotional response. That's the same reason that Ben Crump here is mentioning Emmett Till. This has nothing to do with Emmett Till. This case with Nolan Wells We don't even know, if anything nefarious happened at all. But he's mentioning Emmett Till. He's mentioning Medgar Evers. He's mentioning all of these other names of Black people that died at the hands of police or whatever. He does this. Listen to this. It's all to trigger this emotional response.
The NAACP stood up when another tragedy in Mississippi, taking the life of young Emmett Till. We will stand up for Nolan Wells.
This is disgusting.
Just like the NAACP and civil rights leaders stood up when another Mississippi son was taken in Medgar Evers.
Medgar Evers.
We will stand up for Nolan Wells.
And see, and they're just relating it back to Mississippi because Mississippi has this history, the history of the civil rights workers that were killed in trying to register Black voters in Mississippi. The four or the three white kids and the Black kids that the story Mississippi Burning, movie Mississippi Burning is based on. Medgar Evers, again, killed in Mississippi. Mississippi had a very dark history with racism and fighting against civil rights and desegregation. But that's the history. That happened 60 years ago. You're telling me that people in Mississippi can't change, can't recognize? I mean, look at Germany today. I mean, you're not even allowed to talk about what the Nazis did and what the Nazi party was in Germany. They want to be so removed from that part of their German history that you're not even allowed to talk about it, really, in Germany. And it's kind of the same thing in Mississippi, too. They realize their history. They realize that has been part of who they've known to be. And there's many people in Mississippi that want to escape from that storyline that Mississippi is the Mississippi of the 1950s and 1960s. The state of Mississippi has come a long way. Nolan Wells is evidence of that, as I'm getting ready to show you that he's evidence that Mississippi has come a long way. But to dig up Mississippi's history and use things that happened to Emmett Till 60 years ago, 70 years ago, Medgar Evers 60 years, 70 years ago, to draw a relationship to what happened to Nolan Wells. It's not only wrong, it's disgusting. And they're doing it for politics. I'm going to show you that they're doing it for politics.
In Medgar Evers, we will stand up for Nolan Wells. And just like too many of our young people, Trayvon Martin. Michael Brown, people. You guys remember Michael Brown? Why is he even mentioning Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown again? This is disgusting. He's doing it just to draw a similarity to something that happened. I mean, Michael Brown tried to strong arm rob a convenience store and then tried to take a cop's gun from him and fight him on the ground and then was shot. Barack Obama's own Justice Department, led by a Black attorney general, investigated the case of Michael Brown and found no wrongdoing. Why is this clown mentioning Michael Brown? Why is he mentioning Trayvon Martin? Why is he mentioning Medgar Evers? Why is he mentioning Emmett Till? It's to get an emotional response from people who have a low impulse control. They're emotionally unstable in many situations. That's why they're easily emotionally manipulated. And he's an agitator. He's one of these agitators that G. Edgar Griffin was talking about that the Marxists have working on both sides. They have the Black agitators agitating the Blacks, and they have white agitators agitating the whites. He's a Black agitator agitating the Black community. And that's what this is about. This is what he's doing. He's agitating. And just like too many of our young people, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Botham Jean, Terrence Crutcher, Stephon Clark, Sandra Bland, Atiana Jefferson.
Listen to the crowd, too. Listen to the crowd. Every time he says a name, they're just like, yeah, because it's hitting them emotionally. He's saying those names, and it's intentional. It's hitting them. It's stirring up something inside of him saying all these names, even though none of these people and what happened to any of these people who he's naming have anything to do with Nolan Wells. And we still don't know if anything nefarious happened to Nolan Wells or if he just drowned in the Gulf of America. And he's just doing this to agitate. Like G. Edgar Griffin was saying, he's an agitator. He's doing this to stir up this emotional response. And it's working. Not only for the people there in the room, many people who are going to see this on the news, shared through social media. They're going to see this, and it's going to agitate this emotional response. And that's the design. And they're hoping that they can keep this going all the way into November to use this emotional reaction to this tragedy to get Black voters out to vote. It's about politics. Same thing they did with George Floyd. It's all about getting Black voters out to vote and getting them agitated to come out and vote for Democrats. Completely political. And I know that it is for politics because Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader for the Democrats, he came out and he said this right after Ben Crump did his spectacle there at the NAACP meeting in Chicago, where over 200 people have been murdered in the first 6 months of this year. But he doesn't mention any of their names. Ben Crump doesn't mention anybody, any of the 210 people, 10 plus people, 200 people that have been murdered in Chicago in the first 6 months. You don't mention any of their names, none of their names. I'm sure they're Black too, but the difference between them is that they were killed by other Black people. And Ben Crump don't care about that. Ben Crump don't care about that at all. But this is Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader for the Democrats. Take a listen.
Nolan Wells should be alive today, but instead he was just laid to rest in Mississippi. We stand with his parents, we stand with his family, and we stand with his community in calling for a complete and thorough criminal investigation.
There is a complete investigation going on. What do you mean you're calling for a complete investigation, Hakeem? What is this about? Why is he putting this out on his social media that we stand with Nolan Wells and his family and we're calling for a complete investigation? What makes you think that there isn't a complete investigation going on? There's nothing to even suggest that there's not a complete investigation going on. Why do you need to say this? Why does he need to say this? Because it's about politics, people. They're standing on the grave of this kid and using this kid for politics. That's why you have the minority leader for the Democrats saying this and acting like there's not a complete investigation going on, acting like there's not a grand jury convened. Why do you need to say this?
We stand with his parents, we stand with his family, and we stand with his community in calling for a complete and thorough criminal investigation. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, there's a grand jury, clown. There's a grand jury convened. And what makes you think that there's not a complete investigation? You don't care about that boy. You just want to be speaker. God, I hope this guy never, ever gets the gavel. God, please. If you have no motivation to vote in November for Republicans, other than that this guy never gets his hand on the speaker's gavel, that is the only motivation that you need. But these people are disgusting. And it was only because Nolan Wells did what Martin Luther King said that he had a dream that we could do. Martin Luther King had a dream that little white boys and little white girls could join together and we could judge each other by the content, all that stuff he said on his speech on Washington. This was the picture that set everyone off. When people saw this picture, it was like, oh my God, his 3 white friends killed him. They took him out on the boat on 4th of July and killed him. This is the evidence. He's the only black boy with 3 white friends. Do they look like they're not friends? Do they look like they had some ill will towards this guy? But no, you don't need to know any of that. Only thing you need to know is that one of them is black and 3 of them is white. Something nefarious had to happen. It's absolutely disgusting. But Nolan Wells loved his white friends. He liked hanging out with white people. I mean, there's tons of pictures of Nolan Wells with his white friends. Very integrated, this Mississippi of the 21st century. Nothing like the Mississippi of the 1950s that Benjamin Crump is trying to take you back to. You never would have seen pictures like this in the 1950s and This is how much the state of Mississippi, but not only the state of Mississippi, the country has progressed. And there's people telling you that this is wrong and that the reason that Nolan Wells is dead because he had white friends and he hung out with white people. And they're trying to make the country like a prison. You know, if you go into prison, that's how prisons are run. All the white people hang with white people in prison. All the black people hang with black people. It's a survival mechanism that in the confines of the prison that you have to stay with your own race. You can't race mix with other people, and that's the way that these Democrats and people like all these people that are saying that if Nolan Wells had not been hanging out with his white friends, that he'd still be alive today. They want us to live like we're in prison. That's what they want. They want the white people to hang with the white people, the black people to hang with the black people. No integration, no communication. You can't be friends if you are of different races. I reject that. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. But that's what they're pushing because it's part of this divide and conquer agitation tactic that they're using. And this guy, how much time do I have? I don't have very much time. We're going to get into this guy in the next podcast because like I was explaining to you, that this guy did not just come out of nowhere. This guy came on the scene with a mission to divide this country. And I'm going to show that to you. We're going to get into it in the next podcast. But Barack Hussein Obama came with a mission. He did not just come out of nowhere. If you think that this guy just came out of nowhere and he's elected to the state senate in Illinois, and then 2 years later, he's elected to the United States senator, and then 2 years later, he's president of the United States. If you think that happened organically, you're not a serious person. And that's why that's why the whole thing with Trump, when Trump started asking, for his real birth certificate instead of the certificate of live birth that he tries to put out, when people start asking questions about this guy's real history, his real past, everybody accused you of being racist. The only reason you're asking for his real birth certificate, the only reason you're asking about his college records and how the hell he transferred from Occidental College to Columbia. How do you transfer from Occidental College in Los Angeles to Columbia? How many transfers does Columbia take from Occidental College in Los Angeles to Columbia on a yearly basis? I'd be interested in seeing that. But if you ask any questions about it, ask any questions about his birth certificate, ask any questions about why he was being promoted as a foreigner by his book agent. You ask about any of the stuff that is getting into this guy's history, they called you a racist. They called Donald Trump a racist just for asking about his birth certificate. The only reason you're asking about it is because he's black. No, we're asking about it because we want to know where this fool came from. How do you go from the state senate to the United States Senate to president of the United States in 6 years? No, this guy was brought on the scene to divide us. It was all part of the grand plan. This is Barack Obama as a child with his sister from the Soto godfather. This is his mother. This is his grandfather, CIA. This guy was, and we're going to get into more of Obama in the next podcast. But like I was explaining in the last podcast, that it's no accident that as Obama is coming on the scene, that Hollywood is ready with all of these movies, with all of these productions. What are these productions for? These productions are to condition and to draw emotional response from the black community. Not only from the black community, what do these movies also do for the white community? They instill this white guilt from the white community. So it's the same time that Barack Obama is coming on the scene, 2008, Hollywood is ready with all of these movies, all of these productions to stir up anger and hatred around the black community, and then to stir up white guilt to the white community. And this is no accident. This is no accident. Again, this period, 2008 to 2016, is what it says, saw an unusually large number of major studio films and prestigious television productions exploring American slavery, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, and civil rights movements, movies and TV shows. This is part of the conditioning. This is part of the triggering of the emotional response that they're looking for. Now, it's been almost 10 years since Colin Kaepernick started his protests in the 2006. We're in 2026 at the end of July. I believe that Colin Kaepernick started. Now, remember, before he started kneeling, he was just sitting for the national anthem. He would just sit on the bench. He wouldn't kneel. And then people started noticing, like, hey, Colin Kaepernick's not standing for the national anthem. What's going on here? And then it became a controversy. And then I think Jim Brown, you talked to Jim Brown, and Jim Brown said, well, I suggest that you kneel. You know, kneeling looks better. But at this time, this is in the beginning. This is in preseason, around August. So we're about 10 years ago, this happened. It's a 2016 election. Barack Obama's at the end of his 8 years in office. Donald Trump's running against Hillary Clinton. And the election, this is August of 2016 that this interview takes place. This is the first interview after people recognize that this guy's not standing for the national anthem. He's just sitting on the bench, and he does this locker room interview. And like I said, this guy, he paid for the independent autopsy that Ben Crump is delivering in this presentation that he did this week in Chicago. Colin Kaepernick paid for it. So Colin Kaepernick, this is the first press conference that he does after people recognize that he's not standing for the national anthem. And this is when his protest starts in 2016. Again, at the end of Barack Obama's 8 years in office. Barack Obama's not going to be president anymore 5 months from this interview. And Donald Trump is running against Hillary Clinton. So this is the interview that he does in the locker room. And this begins the whole Colin Kaepernick controversy. This guy, he's explaining in this interview why he's not standing for the national anthem, why he doesn't have any respect for America, why he's angry at white people. Again, he's biracial. He was raised in an adopted family where white parents chose to give him everything, every opportunity that he had in life to succeed, to go to college, to be the pride of University of Nevada, Wolfpack. And he's explaining why America's bad and why he hates America and why he's not standing for the national anthem. And then they get into the fact, they start asking him questions about this being a political year, an election year, and asking him if that had anything to do with his decision not to kneel for the national, or not to stand for the national anthem. I want you to listen to what Colin Kaepernick says here.
Colin, the fact that this is an election year, does this have anything to do with the timing?
Once again,
I don't know if you heard the question. The question is, since this is an election year, does that have anything to do with the timing for you choosing to sit on the bench and not stand for the national anthem.
Does this have anything to do with the timing?
I mean, once again, it wasn't a timing thing. It wasn't something that was planned. But I think the two presidential candidates that we currently have also represent the issue that we have in this country right now.
So the two candidates that we have represent the issues that we're having. As if you watch the entire interview, he says that the issues are that black people were struggling, black people were being killed by the police, black people are being persecuted. That's why I'm sitting on the bench. Not only for, but he also says it's not only for black people. I wish I could play more of this interview because he gets into a lot. He says that it's not only for black people. He says just people in general. He's basically, he says for veterans he says veterans are sleeping on the streets. That's part of it. Why he says that. I mean, it wasn't only a black thing in the beginning and evident by this entire press conference that he says, but then he says that I think that the two presidential candidates that we have running, he's asked the timing. We're in election year. It's August. The election's in November. You got a vigorous campaign going on between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Does it have anything to do with why you're choosing not to stand for the national anthem? He says, well, it wasn't really a timing thing, but I think that the two candidates that we have for president, it shows that, why we have a big issue in this country. And yeah, I mean, that's why that leads to the reason the two candidates we have, not the president that we just had for 8 years. And he's going to be asked about the president that we just had for 8 years, the black president, Barack Obama. But he makes a point to focus on Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump because they're the two candidates that are representing the two major parties in this election.
I mean, once again, it wasn't a timing thing. It wasn't something that was planned. But I think the two presidential candidates that we currently have also represent the issue that we have in this country right now.
You want to expound on that?
I mean, you have Hillary, who's called black teens or black kids super predators. You have Donald Trump, who's openly racist. I mean, we have a presidential candidate who's deleted emails and done things illegally and is a presidential candidate. That doesn't make sense to me, because if that was any other person, you'd be in prison. So what is this country really standing for?
Well, it is a country that's elected a black man president twice, Colin. I mean, can you see people say why the outrage in a country that has elected a black president has done?
So this is a very important question. So he's asked if the timing of the election has anything to do with him choosing not to stand for the national anthem and sit for the national anthem. He says it wasn't really a timing thing, but the two candidates that we have, they show why the country is not really a country that I can stand for, and that I can stand for the national anthem in a country like this. That the two candidates that we have are prime examples of why I'm sitting on the bench for the national anthem. Hillary Clinton's deleted emails, and she should be in jail. Couldn't agree more. Donald Trump's openly racist. I don't believe Donald Trump is openly racist. I believe that's completely ridiculous, and that's part of the propaganda, but you seem to have bought into it. But then the reporter behind him says that this is a country that elected a black president twice. Can something be said about a country that elected the smooth criminal twice? Twice. The smooth criminal was elected. You can't say anything positive about a country that has come from where this country has come from for the past 200 years. And we're at a place now where we have a black president that was elected by the popular vote for 2 terms. You can't say anything positive about the country. I want you to listen to what this idiot says here. Pride of Nevada University, the Wolf Pack.
That doesn't make sense to me, because if that was any other person, you'd be in prison. So what is this country really standing for?
Well, it is a country that's elected a black man president twice, Colin. I mean, can you see people say why the outrage in a country that has elected a black president, has done many things, sacrificed a lot of things for freedom?
It has elected a black president, but there are also a lot of things that haven't changed. There are a lot of issues that still haven't been addressed.
Whoa. Yeah, so it's elected a black president, elected the smooth criminal twice, and at the end of the smooth criminal's 8 years, 2 terms. Now remember when the smooth criminal came on the scene in 2008 when he was elected, on the night that he was elected, he said, change has come to America. What you guys did today, change has come to America. I'm bringing the change, open change. And then we're at the end of this guy's 8 years, and you didn't get the hope and change. You didn't get any change. And does Colin Kaepernick give the smooth criminal the same criticism that he gave Donald Trump and that he gave Hillary Clinton? No, he says that, yeah, we have elected a black president twice, but a lot of things haven't changed. And he says it's not his fault that it hasn't changed. Listen to what he says.
Twice, Colin. I mean, can you see people say why the outrage in a country that has elected a black president, has done many things, sacrificed a lot of things for freedom?
It has elected a black president, but there are also a lot of things that haven't changed. There are a lot of issues that still haven't been addressed. And
well, why haven't these issues been addressed? The smooth criminal ran on hope and change. He said he was going to change the things. Why didn't he change them, Colin? But listen, you got to listen to what he says after that.
A lot of things that haven't changed. There are a lot of issues that still haven't been addressed. And, that's something over an 8-year term. There's a lot of those things that are hard to change. And there's a lot of those things that he doesn't necessarily have complete control over.
Wow. He didn't have enough time. 8 years was enough time to bring the change. And as president, he's president of the United States, chief of executive, and he didn't have the power to change some of those things. Now it's crazy. All these names that Ben Crump was mentioning, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, they're all killed under Obama. Michael Brown under Obama. Obama's Justice Department found no wrongdoing in Michael Brown's killing. A lot of them. Fernando Castillo under Obama. All these people under Obama. Obama had two black attorney generals. Colin Kaepernick says the 8 years is not enough time. He didn't have enough time, and he didn't have control. He didn't have enough control to make the changes, is what Colin Kaepernick says. Now, what is this about?
Outrage in a country that has elected a black president, has done many things, sacrificed a lot of things for freedom.
It has elected a black president, but there are also a lot of things that haven't changed. There are a lot of issues that still haven't been addressed. And, that's something over an 8-year term. There's a lot of those things that are hard to change. And there's a lot of those things that he doesn't necessarily have complete control over.
If you would say that, what would it be a success?
So, there's a lot of things that Obama couldn't change over 8 years, and a lot of things he didn't have control over, is what Colin Kaepernick said. All right. We're going to talk more about Obama on Monday. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.